your friendly neighborhood author, Jonathan, and you are listening to Season 4 of the Floor Rejects podcast, The Wells House Phenomenon. Okay, hello. Welcome to this week's Floor Reject podcast. I am your friendly neighborhood host, author, writer, singer, dancer, songwriter, tomorrow's man, yesterday's woman, who knows, Jonathan here. And I am coming to you live with Chapter 5 of The Wells House Phenomenon. Sorry if I'm a little distracted this week. It's been a rough one. I started out the week by work being a nightmare. I went to the doctor on last Friday, to get my head right, and between you and me, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Woo! And also either anxiety-induced depression or depression-induced anxiety. So that was a fun Friday. Then on Saturday, guess what happened? You never will. My grandma died. And then, do you want to know what happened yesterday? Found out that there was a weak link in our pod, our pod of people who we can still see. Someone tested positive for coronavirus. Wow. It's been a great week for me. And between all that, I did not get my Sims video for the week edited, so, we're going to have a delay on that. And this week, I did write a full chapter. Last week, it was a little bit more of the same. Warren was getting a little bit more used to being in the house around Lila and Thomas, trying to make friends, talking to them just a little bit more than he was used to talking to them. Lila saying strange little things about Thomas, nothing major. He discovered The Office, books with the names of his ancestors on them, stuff like that. So that's kind of where we left off with him. If you remember, he got Lila a lovely set of scented lotions and body washes and candles. And he picked out a weird little Swiss Army knife, like a vintage one that he saw in a store for Thomas. And Thomas seemed a little bit too into it almost, which is interesting. We're going to get into it this week. We're not going to spend a bunch of time chatting. I just wanted to give you a heads up if I seem a little foggy, a little wild. That's why. Also, 2 hours before I went to record this, the internet at my house went down, so the reason all my lights are blue instead of red, if you're watching the video version of this, which nobody is, I can tell nobody is, and that's okay. The room is blue, it's not red, and that is simply because all of my lights just disconnected from the internet, and the ones that were still connected, I managed to get them to only turn blue. So a little bit more sad of a chapter, but I think with the way my life is going this week, that seems about right. So without further ado, let's jump into Chapter 5 of the Wells House Phenomenon. Okay? Chapter 5, Free Fall. Warren's eyes snap open, and his first thought is distinct. He can feel something missing, principally, he thinks, his memories. He can tell it's morning before he glances at his phone, and by the time he's gulped down his breakfast and coffee, he has his task for the day floating through his mind. He's going to bring the manor into the 21st century. He was tired of the non-existent internet access, and he knew the only way it would be done is to do it himself. He also knew that if he could bring the World Wide Web to Wells Manor, he would also be able to bring the world to Wells Manor, better known as his favorite pastimes, online shopping and as much TV as he could watch. He set out to Elkins, heading to the local big box store and gathering the most expensive router, cables, and TVs he found. He found himself fighting the urge to smile as the minimum wage workers loaded electronics that were several months' worth of their wages into the back of his sparkly new SUV before he rolled off the lot and down to the local phone company. He knew his superiority complex was wrong, but that didn't change the glee he had at looking at the thousands of dollars of electronics in his rearview mirror. He knew that there were phone lines at the manor. He'd seen the outdated square outlets on the wall. And when he told them that he needed to make sure that service was activated on the property, there was no record of it in their computer system. Dahlia, the woman working the front desk, was little help as Warren frustratedly rubbed his temples. I mean, there may be no service there now, but at some point there was. I've seen the outlets, Warren explains, and Dahlia sighs. Mr. Wells, I understand, but maybe you're mistaken? Maybe it's some other type of plug, she says. And as Warren groans again, her face lights up. You said it was an old house, right? Well, let me check this. She pulls a dusty old book from a shelf at the back of her cubicle. These are the oldest records we have. They run back to the 30s, she says, opening the book with the crack of fragile old paper. What was the address? She asks him, scanning the pages and tracing her fingers. Warren repeats it, and after what seemed like 100 pages, she laughs. Here it is, set up for a phone line in 1979, but the job was never completed. I can't read the notes. The ink is really faded, but that explains your outlets. I think that means we can turn on service remotely as long as there's no interruption in the lines after all these years, she tells Warren, who gives a small, relieved laugh. He pays for the fastest service the old lines would allow, knowing that he didn't want to try and get permission from Lila, and heads back to the house. Once there, he flags down Thomas as he pulls up, and together they unload the TVs, and Warren sets out to get the internet working. As he prepares to power the router up for its initial run, after using a bunch of adapters to get a connection to the phone jack, Lila comes into the hallway where he's working. Warren? What's that? She asks, pointing at the modem. It's a router for the Wi-Fi, Warren says, trying to keep his tone even. Lila nods uncertainly, pulling at the sleeve of her ruby-red pilgrim top. So what does it do? She asks, her tone bordering on fearful. Again, Warren swallows a shocked laugh. It'll project Wi-Fi through the house so we can use the internet. Don't you use, like, Facebook or send your friends emails? He asks. She shakes her head, and when Thomas shows up, sweating from getting the TVs unboxed, Lila turns quickly and scurries up the stairs without a word. Mind helping me get the TV set up? Warren asks, and Thomas shrugs. Warren watches as all the lights flash green across the router and his phone suddenly dings. He laughs, knowing his connection was successful. In the sitting room, he and Thomas set the first large TV on a large credenza across from the couches, where he plugs it in, connects it to Wi-Fi, and has a movie streaming within minutes. He does a small victory dance as his favorite sitcom runs across the screen, and he smiles as he looks at Thomas's dumbfounded expression. He stands right in front of the 75-inch screen, completely enthralled as the TV flashes. Wow, he murmurs, and Warren nods. Yeah, it's a pretty clear image, he says, handing Thomas the remote and going to his room to set up his own TV. At dinner that night, Thomas eats in a hurry, excusing himself to the sitting room to watch more TV. Lila seems more distant than normal, but Warren doesn't say anything, knowing that Lila was allowed to have her own stuff going on. He tries to pull more conversation from her, but eventually resigns himself to watch TV with Thomas. He's found a rerun of Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and is sitting engrossed in a chair he pulled up to the TV. Sitting that close to it's bad for your eyes, Warren says, and Thomas laughs, scooting the chair back to its original position. I love this movie. Marilyn was always my favorite actress as a kid. I loved her hair and her style and the way she was so unapologetic, Warren says, and Thomas nods distractedly as Lila walks through the room, watching the TV for a moment as Warren describes all the things that he'd loved about Marilyn Monroe movies as a kid. His mom had a huge collection of old movies he'd watch in his room after he was supposed to be asleep, and between Rear Window, The Birds, and 7-Year Itch, he was well versed in movies of this era. Thomas is too distracted to hold a conversation, and so Warren retires to his room, watching an old sitcom to fall asleep, which he does much faster than he had yet in the house. He wakes up in another dream. The room is bathed in a dim red light from the massive display, with the blue of the wallpaper and bedspread neutralized, leaving the entire room in shades of red and black. With his memory restored, he knows that this wasn't like the other nights when Lila would come to visit, and the room seems unnaturally still around him, as if he's in limbo. Since he knows he's in a dream, he creeps towards the bedroom door just like last time, and finds that the hallway is covered in the same red light as soon as the door cracks open. He tiptoes into the hall, down the kitchen, and looks around, seeing no signs of the others. He creeps into the sitting room, where that TV glows red too. He moves to go back to the entrance hall, about to climb the stairs again, but then the wallpaper begins to dance and morph around the place where he had his hand. He tries to remove it, but the wall seems to ripple, mounting up over his hand and pulling at him, pulling him towards the wall. He pulls back, tugging at his own wrist, struggling to free himself, but suddenly he's pulled closer to the wall, up to the shoulder, a face pulling through the wallpaper towards him. "Warren," it moans, its voice raspy and strained as it pulls him into the wall. Warren is immobilized, his body half in the entrance hall and the other half through the wall in a small closet. He tries to shout, but his chest is so constrained in the plaster that all he can manage is a small groan. He slaps at the wall, panicking as he feels the edges of his vision blur. He can only twist at his intersection of the wall, pushing or pulling his way free, but he stops again as the figure again rears itself from the wall, tearing free into the darkness of the room. "Warren." Its voice sounds like the shattering of glass, and he struggles even harder from the wall, but he can't free himself as it draws closer and closer. A sliver of light coming from under the door to the hallway stops it, and it stands still, swaying back and forth in the darkness. What do you want?" Warren wheezes. It doesn't answer, only standing still. Warren can feel its eyes on him, tracking him as he scratches weakly at the walls. "Why is this happening?" Warren yelps as the light flickers for a moment, and he can hear the dragging again as the figure walks towards him. "No," he squeaks, and again he can smell the stagnant, rotten breath he remembered. "What the hell?" He hears Thomas's voice in the entrance hall on the other side of the wall. The figure stops moving again. The only sound it's making are its ragged breaths. "Warren?" Thomas yells, and Warren taps on the wall feebly, almost completely out of oxygen. "In here." His voice dies with the last of the air in his lungs. Just as the door to the closet cracks open and red light floods the room, Warren hears the dark figure utter one word, and the room flashes brightly enough to blind him. "Remember." His eyes flutter, and the memory of his dream has faded to a dull ache at the base of his neck that he was becoming accustomed to. "Breakfast, Warren." Lila's voice rings from the hall. He climbs from the bed quickly, throwing his robe and heading to the kitchen. Lila turns as he walks into the room. Her blonde hair is coiffed and neatly curled around her face, and Warren can't help but feel a strange vibration in his being, like the intuitive feeling that makes a person move a split second sooner than an attacker expects. He shakes it off as she smiles at him, primping at her hair as she hands him a coffee cup. "Did you do something new with—" "Never mind," Warren says, plopping down in front of the kitchen windows as Lila stirs at something on the stove. "What's on the itinerary for the day, Warren?" she asks, plating a steaming breakfast and setting it in front of him. Her high, lilting voice had the airy quality of a young Hollywood starlet, like the women he would always imitate in those old movies as a kid. I'm not sure. I guess I'll just watch some TV, maybe take a look online for something to do," he says, and she nods, taking a long sip of her coffee before speaking. There is something I would like to show you. Something I think might interest you," Lila says, and as Warren scrapes the last of his breakfast from his plate, Lila motions for him to follow her. She leads him to the stairs, and he follows up the stairs, looking around on the second-floor landing, seeing only a long hallway running from either side. She motions for him to continue up to the third floor, where there is no open-facing banister. This hallway is similar to the second floor, but much darker, with no light from the entrance hall. Again, Lila continues up the stairs, leading to another long hallway all the way down the left side, to a set of double doors at the end. She pushes them open, and into a large raftered room, with a circular inset window 3/4 of the way up the wall. This room is home to generations worth of Wells' inspiration. It's where your grandfather used to come a lot. Well, actually, I don't know what he did up here, but I found him up here a lot. Thinking, I guess. It can get lonely when you have a soul like his. I would always just find him sitting on the floor, staring out the window. It's been everything from a workshop to a flower arranging studio. she says slowly, looking around at the walls covered in old paintings and random bits of detritus. So, what did you want to show me? He asks her, and she laughs, her voice breathy. I just want you to have a place away from us. Yeah, I know that between Thomas and I and the house, it can all be a bit much. We won't bother you up here, she says, backing up out of the room, her wide hips swishing quietly as she shuts the doors. Huh, Warren mumbles, looking around the room. To him, all the strange little trinkets about the room were uninteresting. He was much more interested in having a few moments of peace during the day, away from them. He pulls out his phone, leaning down on the windowsill, looking out at the back half of the property. He intends to open up his favorite dating app to look for some casual flirting, but he notices way out towards the wooded edge of the property a strange-looking group of objects. It's too far for him to see the area clearly, and instead of swiping through hairless torsos for hours, he ventures down the stairs, sneaking quietly through the front door and around the side. He ventures down the gravel road, past the barn that houses his grandpa's truck and trailer. He sees in the distance the strange rocks, and as he draws closer, he realizes that they aren't rocks, they're headstones. He gets to the closest one, a worn, half-round thing sticking crookedly from the ground. He leans closer and reads the name off of it. Arthur Wells, his great-great-grandfather. He reads the next one, a smaller, new-looking stone. Uncle Mark, he mutters, and next to it, beside a giant pillar in dedication to the founder of Wells Manor, is a patch of bare earth, the grass around it just now sprouting up to cover the dirt. It was his grandfather's grave, and he sinks to his knees in the musky, wet soil. The stone was unassuming, carved only with his name, and Warren can feel tears burning down his cheeks. Grandpa, he says meekly, as the gust of wind blows dirt all around him, up into his already blurry eyes. He rubs at them, and for a split second he sees someone standing behind the gravestone. He gasps fearfully and rolls his fist over his face. As he clears his eyes, he sees he's still alone in the little patch. His eyes well up again as he gently rubs the cold, rough-hewn stone. Why? He shouts, feeling the abandonment ramping up in his chest. He was so close, mere feet from his grandfather, and yet still he had no answers. He knew why he had come here, but why would his grandfather? He already had all the money and land he could ask for. Warren was so angry, wondering why he would leave. The question, as painful as it was only partially answered. He knew where he went and what he was doing, but the why was still unclear. He dug his fingers into the soil around him, punching at it, letting his tears mix into the dirt. Warren? Thomas's voice breaks into the melancholy of the man on the ground after several minutes of wallowing. Hey, yeah, sorry, Thomas, I knew he was out here, but I didn't realize that he was out here, Warren says, standing slowly and dusting himself off. Yes, we didn't know when to tell you. Usually when the caretaker arrives, it's a less, solemn affair. I apologize, he says, and Warren pats him on the back, walking back towards the house. Not your fault, Thomas. You didn't abandon me as a child to live alone without telling me where you were for a decade, Warren says, laughing bitterly as a dark storm cloud creeps over the horizon towards Elkins. Still sorry, Warren. I know this wasn't easy. Thomas tries to comfort Warren as he jogs to keep up with him. Really, it's fine. I just gave him the benefit of one too many doubts, I think, he says, and Thomas doesn't respond, only walking silently next to Warren, who pulls open the door to his Jeep, is down the road and into the city before he knows it. He picks up a carton of cigarettes, something he'd never had enough money to do before, as well as takes the time to open up his dating app. He swipes through many profiles, only accepting the ones of a few older, more distinguished-looking men who were in the exact demographic that appealed to him. His heightened abandonment issues fueled flurries of messages throughout the day, from the time he left the gas station where he got the cigarettes to the evening which he spent in front of the TV, opting not to eat dinner in the dining room with the others. His brain was foggy. He wasn't overwhelmed by grief or anger, but his mind was quiet, tired from the emotional labor of feeling loss all over again. Eventually, Lila and Thomas sat in the front room with him as he watched some sad war movie, but when he didn't say a word for the last 45 minutes, the duo took the proverbial hint and left him alone. He absent-mindedly messaged back a couple of the men from earlier in the day, one of them particularly hot under the collar. He had given Warren a plethora of activities he wanted to engage in, but Warren couldn't focus, not when he could only think about his grandfather lying out in that cold field. A crack of thunder rocked the house as the credits rolled and the TV flashed and flickered. Warren shut it off, wandering back into his bedroom. He continued to message the men back as his eyes grew heavy, and when he shut his bathroom door after showering, another round of thunder shook the manor, leaving dust motes in the air as he drew the bedspread over him. He tried to find something to watch, but every channel was static, and his phone was disconnected from the Wi-Fi. He saw that the list he had sent to one of the men, a list of things he was looking for, was undelivered. He knew the storm was responsible, and a moment later, another house-shaking crack killed the lights. He shrugged, leaving the phone screen on the man's profile as his only light, and laid his head down. His eyes shut quickly, and he was dreaming again. His dream came instantly, and he was sitting up in bed. The lights were still out, and he heard footfalls in the hall. Lila steps into the room, a 6-tiered candelabra in her hand. He remembers now that she didn't always have short blonde hair, a deep voice, and the figure she sported now. In fact, she was a completely different person from what he could tell. "Strong storm, Master Wells. I brought you some light," she says, setting the fixture on his dresser. "Thanks, Lila," Warren says, hoping she will leave, but she draws closer, almost as if this dream version of her is unaware of his consciousness. "So, would you like some company?" she asks, leaning over the footer of his bed, letting her robe fall open as Warren pulls back towards the headboard. No, Lila, I would rather just, watch a video on my phone or something," he says, and she smiles. "I'll watch one with you. How does that sound?" she asks excitedly. Not waiting for an answer, she crawls up onto the bed and grabs his phone. When she grabs it, she swipes over to the dating app, and before Warren can stop her, she reads the profile on screen and the list of particularly explicit things that Warren wanted to do to the man he had been messaging before bed. Oh my. She puts a hand to her mouth as Warren grabs at the phone. "Sorry, Lila, you shouldn't have had to see that. Well, it's been a bit lonely," Warren says, and Lila clicks her teeth, sliding off the bed unceremoniously. "I am sorry, Warren. I shouldn't have looked. It never occurred to me. No matter. Black hair, brown eyes, tall, strong, dominant. Interesting taste, Warren, but we can try this again as soon as I can appeal to your tastes," she says cryptically, walking out the door before Warren can say anything else. "What the fuck?" he mutters, and the door clicks closed and a clap of thunder echoes through the walls again. The room goes black. The entire next day, he didn't see Lila. Thomas said she was feeling ill and that he was going to take care of dinner. Warren laughs and waves a hand, telling him he will take care of it. As dinner time approaches, he orders a couple of pizzas, but realizes he has to go to town to pick them up, as they were too far out in Randolph County to have them delivered. The drive was quick, and on his way back he drops by the supermarket and grabs some ginger ale and soup for Lila, hoping that she would be okay with tomato bisque from a can. At the manor, Thomas is relieved when he realizes that he didn't have to cook. He admits to Warren that he would have likely come out to the dining room with something completely inedible. Warren warms up the soup for Lila, and he carries it up the stairs as Thomas distractedly searches for the plates and napkins down to the end of the hall on the right side. He knocks at the door, covered in scratches and wear marks, and suddenly realizes he had no idea if this was her door. He didn't know why he was at this door. He had no idea where Lila and Thomas's rooms were. Just as he turns to go find Thomas, Lila opens the door, her bright blue eyes staring around the edge of it. "Warren? Where's Thomas? Did he send you up here?" She seems confused. "No, honestly, I don't know how I knew this was your door. I just did. But I got you some soup today while I was out. Thomas said you weren't feeling well," Warren tells her, and he can see her shifting uncomfortably, half hidden behind the door. "Let me bring this in for you. Maybe it'll help you feel better." Warren offers, but the gap in the door shrinks quickly. No, I'm not decent. Just set the tray down and I'll get it in a moment. Her voice is filled with alarm, and he notices a lock of hair hanging down in the sliver of her room that he can see. It appears to be long and almost iridescent, shifting between white and black. Okay. He sets the tray down and steps back, turning to leave. Thank you, Warren, she says quietly as the door shuts. He doesn't bother to answer and instead joins Thomas in the sitting room where he already has the pizza and plates sitting out and ready to eat. Dig in, man. You don't have to wait for me, Warren says, plopping down next to Thomas, who obeys with no restraint. Warren shows Thomas his favorite show from childhood, and an old sitcom about a group of older women living in Florida. He doesn't seem to get most of the jokes, but laughs along with Warren as they eat. Once the pizza has been decimated, Thomas cleans up before returning to the TV. To Warren, he doesn't even seem concerned with what is on, just fascinated by the screen. What's your favorite show? I'm sure we can find it, Warren asks after a while, but Thomas just stutters, unable to come up with an answer. Thomas, you've watched TV before, right? I don't mean that rudely, there aren't any in the house, and that, at least that I've seen, you have, right? Warren is careful to keep his tone neutral, and Thomas looks at him, measuring up his answer before he opens his mouth. Yes, well, when your grandfather was here, he didn't like television, so we didn't watch any. We didn't have one here, and well, we don't get paid for anything other than what the house needs, so I haven't seen one in a long time, he explains, and Warren nods, still suspicious, but content to resume watching TV. Thomas does as well, excusing himself after just a few minutes to bed. Warren sighs, turning the TV off and going to his own room where he showers, sets an alarm for 8 a.m. the next morning, and slips into another dream as easily as he slipped under the silk sheets. He's dreaming. His room is dark, and by the light of his phone flashlight, he navigates out to the entrance hall. He doesn't touch the walls this time, remembering what had happened before, and ventures up the stairs, keeping an eye out for the dark figure. At the second-floor landing, he can see that the bowl of soup is still sitting outside Lila's room, and again he hears the low moans coming from her. As he begins to walk towards the door, knowing that this was a dream and he could do whatever he wanted, the dark figure materializes a foot in front of him. He gasps, stumbling back against the railing. It jerks towards him, and eventually he can't get any further from it without risking falling over the railing. Warren, remember. The raspy voice is steadier than it was, and Warren doesn't shudder as it leans closer. Remember what? I can't when I'm awake, he says, and the figure places a shrouded hand on his where it was clutching the railing. Remember the night, it begins hoarsely. Lila's door rattles, interrupting the thing as it spoke. Suddenly, as if the figure could inspire the feeling in Warren, he fears not it, but Lila seeing him. He can see the door crack open, and he looks back at the figure, searching the space where its face should be, but is distracted as the door to the opposite end of the hall creaks open. Mother? He can hear Thomas's confused voice call out from it. With no warning, the figure has flipped Warren over the railing. He grasps at it, clutching at the figure, but his vision spins as he free falls towards the hardwood floor beneath him. It rushes up to meet him, the knots of the boards becoming clear as he grimaces and braces for impact, only to shoot up from his bed, grasping and grabbing at his head, the sound of his phone's irritating alarm filling his ears as the dream vaporized in his mind. Okay. We're back. We're going to stay with the blue here because I don't feel like changing it, and I don't know which lights aren't working. So we're going to go with it. As you can tell in this chapter, I'm working on my pacing. I'm trying to cram more into a chapter. So it's the same pretty much 5,000 words. Right now we're teetering at 24,434 words, and that's balanced really evenly across 5 chapters. I think one chapter is just like 700 words short, and that's where we're getting most of the difference here. But I'm cramming more into the same amount of time. We're getting 1, 2, 3 dreams in this chapter, I think. Let me check and make sure. We've got the dream with the figure throwing him over the railing, the dream with Lila coming in, and he's remembering that she doesn't look the way she used to look. And then I think there was another one in the beginning. Warren's eyes snap open. So he wakes up from a dream. So I guess that doesn't really count. No, it's 3. Because the first dream, yeah, 3 dreams. Because the first dream, he gets caught in the wall. And this is all kind of the same story. It's the same, everything is going to link up eventually. And I haven't made it difficult. Really, I've made it so that you can listen, you can put it together if you think about it for a few minutes, but if you don't want to put it together yourself, it will put itself together pretty quickly. So everything's going to come together, and then once the figure kind of crosses paths with Lila and Thomas, and they cross paths with Warren in his dreams, or however that's going to work, then we get to the meat of the story. Not the meat of the story, but we get to a new part of the story where things are a little bit clearer. Maybe not for Warren so much, but things are clearer for the listener, for the reader. Oh, it's 10 o'clock at night and my neighbor's pulling a trailer through gravel. I really thought somebody was trying to murder me. Sorry. Oops. But I'm working on pacing, trying to get more information, more interactions into a chapter instead of spending 3,000 words describing one dream and one afternoon in Warren's day, or Warren's life. I'm describing 2 afternoons and a dream, or 2 dreams and an afternoon, cramming a little bit more into each area so that we can get more story in the same amount of words. Something I noticed this week that I want to work on, or that I'm sure I do a lot, but I know that my sentence structure it's long. I've always been told when I write I'm wordy. I'm not succinct. I don't choose the shortest way to get somewhere, and I think that's okay. I don't think everybody reads something for entertainment to read it the shortest way possible. And a lot of times when we read, and I've said this before, when we read, our brains kind of just skip over certain parts of a sentence, or we read it so quickly that it doesn't even bother us. But what I have noticed that I do a lot is my sentence structure is Warren does this as something, something, something. So it's not like Warren does this as Lila does that, or Warren does this as Thomas does that, but it's like Warren does this as something else happens, or there's always a description of, not always, but there's often Warren does something, and then there's a description of what's going on kind of around him, or what he's doing at the same time as something else. And to me, that paints a picture, but it's almost, sometimes I feel like when I write like it's kind of like I'm in my head writing a play, but I'm including the stage directions and the background audience. I'm including everybody's lines at once. You know what I mean? I'm including the background lines as well as the chorus lines, everyone's lines all at the same time. And I want to get a little bit better at deciding when that is or is not a good thing to include. Some people love flowery language. I personally love flowery language, and I read entertainment style stuff. But like I can't really justify doing it every other sentence, and that's okay. I don't write and do this podcast or this video podcast. I don't do it really to like tell you, oh, this is how great this thing I wrote is. It would be lovely if someone would tell me how great it is and offer to publish me without me having to come up with $6,000 to $10,000 to publish. That would be great. It's probably not going to happen. What I really do this for is, number one, it forces me every week to sit down for 3, 4, 5 hours and write 5,000 words of a story, and not only practice writing, but practice long-form narrative storytelling. And then this gives me hours to practice learning how to video edit, learning how to audio edit, learning how to copy edit, all sorts of things that I just never thought I would know how to do. And like I've said, everybody says, you can't see this if you're just listening, but I'm doing air quotes. Everybody says you have to put 10,000 hours into something to become a master at it. Again, I'm not there yet. I always say again, it's like when I say as. I'm not there yet, but I'm on my way. And this is a way for me to sit down and make sure every week that even if this is the only writing I do, if this is all I do to entertain myself all week, I spend a little bit of time working on this thing that I love, which is why I like to focus on, in the last part of the episodes, now that I've kind of restructured them a little bit, I just like to focus not so much on going over what happened in the chapter, but talking a little bit about what I do, or what I'm trying to do differently, or what I've just noticed and that maybe I'll do differently, maybe I won't. But I like it either way. I'm trying to get better with voices. When I was doing the Dark Figures voice, I tried to be a little spooky. And I wish that I was like an audio engineer, or that I had the money to pay an audio engineer so that I could send all this to them every week and they could put in creepy sound effects underneath and make it really polished and good. I unfortunately do not have that ability. Number one, it's not a skill set that I have already. And even if I did, I don't have access to the time and resources to do so. But with that all being said, I think I'm going in a good direction. I was a little worried the first couple of chapters as I was writing them, especially once I ran out of what I had kind of pre-written, getting ready to launch season 4. I got a little worried that I was going to be drifting and like not looking actively for where we're going next. But I feel like because I like the idea of this story a lot, even if it's not the most original, and I know it's not, even if it's not the first time that someone has told a story like this, I like the idea of this story in my brain. And because of that, I think I put a lot more time and effort into thinking actively about where's the next chapter going. Like, in this chapter, I spent the majority of it kind of showing how easily Warren just is like, okay, I'm going to watch TV now. Again, if you're just listening, I just like fell away from the camera. I just leaned back from the camera and was lazy. Warren very much just kind of veggies out as soon as there's a TV and internet. Like, he's the quintessential millennial, sort of Gen Z cusp person who, given the opportunity, I think a lot of us, I consider myself like a Gen Z millennial cusp. I think technically I'm a millennial, but I don't know. I think a lot of us now kind of have this idea of like, we all had these grand dreams as kids, and we're from the generation or from the era in which kids are told you can be whatever you want. But now, like, we've seen our dreams kind of slowly break down in front of us. A lot of us, not everybody. Some people have followed their dreams and lived their dreams, and that's great for you. Me, that has not happened before, and I don't think it's happened for most people. So sorry to burst your bubble. You can't see this if you're just listening, but I really like this angle I found where I can just hide the bottom half of my face behind a microphone, and then you can't see my chin, and all you see is my eyes, which are my best feature. But so I feel like the generation that Warren would be, if this is a modern day, like 2020 story, the generation that Warren would be at his age is the generation of kids who were told you have to go to college. If you go to college, you're going to get a good job. If you do good in school, you're going to get a good job. You're going to have a good life. And then we get out there, and a lot of us who aren't lucky enough to have a lot of privilege in that area, in that arena, we realized it's not that easy. The job market is broken. The housing market is broken. Our government is broken. And so I think a lot of us are just, and a lot of people that aren't just Gen Z millennials, but I know it's really common in Warren's demographic and in my demographic that we're just kind of like, let's just check out. Like, check out, be done. And if we had that option, like, I think anyone pretty much would take it, but a lot of people would put up a much larger fight, because most people are more social. But it seems like the younger the generation gets, the more we're okay with being socially distant all the time, or just kind of not caring and giving it all up for peace and quiet. Even at like I'm 25, and I'd be fine with, if I never had to work another day dealing with the public a day in my life. Oh no, I don't get to see anyone but 2 days a year. Okay, like, oh no, like, it would be a serious thought that I would have to have if I could do something like this. And like, that was what this chapter was about, was showing that Warren, the first thing he does when he's like, I'm bored, is he doesn't like pick up a book. He doesn't. Oh, I thought about writing it where he goes up into the attic room, the workspace that Lila shows him, and she shows him that because in her mind she's giving him ways to entertain himself like the older generations would have. But I thought about writing it where he goes up there and he finds an old easel and he rips the sheet off the easel and he becomes a master painter. Like, he's so good at pottery, or he finds an old machine that he starts to fix. But then I realized that's not really, that's a bridge too far for me to write. It might not be for some people, but I like to, even in my stories that are full of fantasy and like spooky ghosts in your dreams and ladies trying to come onto you and it's pretty clear you're stone cold gay, like, I still like a little bit of realism. And I think realistically that a 20-something-year-old Gen Z millennial cusp probably wouldn't go up to this room and like immediately pick up a new hobby. If he'd been deprived of the internet for a week, he would take his $500,000 and go buy a couple 4K TVs and set the house up for a little bit more comfort. And I also wanted to start to get into his sexuality a little bit more. Let me give you like a little spoiler. Let me adjust the way I'm sitting too, because I've been having chest pains, and not like COVID chest pains, but just like maybe smoking cigarettes as a teen really is catching up with me. Let me kind of cut into the story a little bit, right? So Lila, we recognize, and that's another thing, is Lila has now changed her appearance. And kind of towards the end of the chapter, we seem like, oh, maybe she's going to change her appearance again. That's why she's hiding. When Warren is awake, he doesn't notice. You'll notice after he's awake, he just describes her blonde hair. He doesn't even recognize that her signature red hair that has been her thing since he met her a few days earlier is suddenly red, and she's a little bit fuller figured, which I couldn't figure out a way that felt exactly right to describe a woman or a feminine body. Nothing felt right, and then I realized it's because it's not really my place. But you have to. There's got to be a way to show a descriptor, or to show a change, and so that was the best term I could come up with, and it's a term that a lot of people used about Marilyn Monroe, who's kind of Lila's new archetype. But so Lila has changed her appearance. She looks different. Warren doesn't notice that during the day. He realizes it at night when all of his memories are kind of intact, but during the day he doesn't notice it. And I kept in mind what my friend told me last season when she was listening. You have to give your reader, and I don't think this is something she made up. I'm pretty sure someone else has said this. You have to give your reader the benefit of the doubt to realize that they'll pick up on something like that, and to realize that they'll pick up on it and not think that you made a mistake in writing it. Because it almost just feels like a mistake. But that's kind of the point, that the narrator glosses over it so seamlessly that you don't even pick up on it as a reader, hopefully, until you're kind of like, wait a second, blonde hair, coiffed perfectly. She had long red hair yesterday, and now she's got short blonde hair. And then Warren realizes it in his dream. So that's a lot of what I liked about this chapter. But the last thing I wanted to focus on was bringing Warren's sexuality kind of into the story a little bit more, because I said that the story is not focused around sex, and we haven't really, like, he's avoided every sexual interaction with Lila that he can because he's not interested, and she doesn't seem to be getting the hint, which I get it. I mean, some people are just so drop dead beautiful that they've never been rejected before. I'm not one of those people, but I'm sure it's happened to someone. Look at this vein in my forehead. Jesus Christ. But so Lila is like not getting the hint, but Warren hasn't really been super. I'm sure he's been interested in things going on around him, but he hasn't had an opportunity to reveal to the narrator and therefore the audience kind of what he is looking for in a man, right? Because we can kind of infer that he's going to try and find some companionship. We've seen in this chapter he's looking for a little bit of companionship. I haven't figured out if we're going to see him venture out for companionship, but let's take a a step into the story that hasn't been written yet. Right now, Lila is the one who her like appearance is changing by the day. It's changing every time she thinks she knows what Warren is into. What's going to happen when she figures out that what Warren is into is not what she's got cooking good looking? Do you know what I mean? My idea at first was that it was just going to be Lila, right? Again, if you know where the story's going, if you know what Lila and Thomas's deal is, you get it already. And I thought about it just being Lila because it could just be Lila. She's changing everything about her physical appearance. Why couldn't she... Let me think of the right phrasing here because I don't want to screw it up. I don't want to be that guy. She can change everything about her physical appearance, right? So she can change her physical appearance to match the physical traits that Warren is looking for in a man, someone who would be self-described a man. Let's assume that Warren is not transphobic. Let's hope. I don't know. He's got some shitty qualities, so cross our fingers. But then I thought, that's no fun. And also, that just leaves two people in a house. Like, that just leaves a good guy and a bad guy, or two bad guys or two good guys. Like, you kind of need more than that, right? You need a good guy, you need a bad guy, you need someone in the middle, you need somebody who's had a change of heart, you need, like, foils to come in and out and kind of say, this is weird, or this thing that's going on is not right. So I wanted to, one, give Warren the chance to open up in front of the audience and kind of show what he was into, which Warren's type is let me get close to the mic. Warren's type is daddies. He's into papas. He's into fathers. Look how white I am in the camera. Jesus Christ. He's into older, more distinguished men. And that's okay. We get it. It's 2020. Age is nothing but a number. And I mean, really, it's really not. It's just a number. It doesn't matter. Let's be honest. We've seen these fathers out here. Fathers, people's fathers are out here bearing their chests with... It's a gift. Men are garbage, but they are also a gift. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's like Taco Bell. You know, a man is like Taco Bell. It is so good to look at and it is so good to eat, but it is going to hurt you. It's going to hurt you at some point, and it's going to hurt you bad. And that's men. Really, men are like Taco Bell. Wow. Has anyone ever written that down? No? Okay. But that's the last thing I wanted to give the reader, the audience, the listener, whatever you are, however you qualify with this story, if you're watching it, if you're listening, however, is a look into what Warren is into, because eventually Lila is going to pick up on the fact that she is not what Warren wants. And we have to assume that if Lila is Thomas's mother, then Thomas is like Lila, and that his physical appearance is also subject to change. And I'll tell you right now, it is subject to change. And we are going to see Thomas, their personalities don't seem to change, right? Like, so far, Lila is this just like there to serve, doesn't really have a personality, boring, sexy lady. Like, that's all she really is. And Thomas is much quieter, more reserved, like has small bursts of smiles or happiness or joy or conversation, but is all around very guarded. We're going to see that their personalities tend to stay the same. It's their outer appearances that change at the drop of a hat, at a day's notice, at a night's notice, really. So I think that's exciting. I think that's where we'll leave it, because I'm starting to feel like my throat's going to fall out of my butt. What? Don't look at the side of my head. If you're just listening to this, I turned my head and then I realized you could see my side profile, and that's not it. I said last week I'd have a new Sims video out, but y'all can thank my grandma for dying. That was like really inconsiderate of her, because I had a lot to do this weekend and instead I had to grieve her. That's cool. Thanks, Grandma. I don't know. You can thank her, so I'll get it edited later this week and posted. It is, I think I said it last week, it's the office, bedroom, bathroom, dining room, and a little more construction of the house. We're just kind of working on it slowly but surely, and this is an entire novel, and a lot of the rooms are just going to be copy-paste rooms because it is a boarding house, and a lot of the bedrooms are just giant empty bedrooms. Like, there's nothing that special about them. But until next week, I have been your friendly neighborhood painting of a still life image of flowers in a vase with robin's eggs at the bottom, Jonathan. And this has been the Floor Rejects podcast. Now, if this is the audio version, goodbye. If this is the video version, I'm going to cover this camera back up because I do not want my FBI agent to see when I get in the bathtub and I lay down really low in the water and I'm watching videos and TikToks on my phone. And you can see my boobs floating in the water, so I'm going to cover this camera up, okay? Goodbye. Bye. Ooh, covered up with some green velvet. She wore blue velvet.